Now we're going to move on to communication apprehension. We'll start by defining it. Communication apprehension is an individual's level of fear or anxiety associated with either real or anticipated communication with another person or persons. There are a few different types of communication apprehension, so we'll go over all of those real quick. The first is trait communication apprehension, in which one possesses a shy trait. So it's just who you are. You are generally a little bit of an anxious communicator. You prefer to be quiet, and you feel a little shy in social situations. There's also context-based communication apprehension, which is a fear of communicating in certain contexts. A big one for a lot of people is public speaking. You may be an outgoing, like bubbly, friendly personality normally, talking to your friends, coworkers, even strangers, but the thought of getting up and speaking in front of an audience makes you so nervous. There's also audience-based communication apprehension, which is the fear of speaking to certain people or groups. This may sound a little bit like the example I just gave, but the difference here is it's the particular audience that brings you that feeling of apprehension. Like maybe you're comfortable speaking in front of a bunch of strangers in a public speaking situation, but if all your friends are in the front row, that can give you some more communication apprehension than you would normally have. And there's also situational communication apprehension, which is apprehension to communicate in specific sets of circumstances. So if you're speaking about a particularly sensitive topic, maybe it is political in some way, that could maybe make you a little bit more nervous than other situations. So again, those types of communication apprehension are trait communication apprehension, context-based communication apprehension, audience-based communication apprehension, and situational communication apprehension. There are a few different causes of communication apprehension. The first is novelty. If you've never given a public speech before and this is your first time, that could make you very nervous. Formality is another cause. So maybe you've given like public speaking presentations in class or something before, you've done extracurriculars where you've had a leadership position, but maybe at your first like real job formal presentation, the formality of it all makes you nervous. Somewhat related is subordinate status. So if you're giving a presentation to your boss who has power over you, pays your bills, can fire you if they so choose, that could make you have communication apprehension if you're talking to that person. Peer evaluation is another potential cause of communication apprehension. I use the example of having all your friends in the front row of a big speech you're giving. That would be an example of communication apprehension caused by the threat of peer evaluation. You don't want to look silly in front of your friends, or maybe you're a silly person normally with your friends and you're afraid that they're gonna like perceive it a little bit weird if you're all formal and serious. This similarity is also a potential cause of communication apprehension. So this means that you are in some way dissimilar to the individual or individuals that you are interacting with. Another one is conspicuousness. If you feel like your communication and the things that you're saying are under a microscope, that can make you have a little bit more communication apprehension because you're so worried about like the weight of your words and if you're saying things in the way in which that you would like to present them. Another potential cause is lack of attention. So the opposite of feeling like you're under a microscope, if you're giving this big speech or talking about something that's really important to you and nobody's really listening, those can also increase those feelings of anxiety and apprehension with the communication situation. And finally, also prior history. If you have given speeches or interacted with a certain individual in a communication context that has not gone well, it is possible that those prior experiences could cause you to be apprehensive about upcoming communication experiences. So again, those causes that we just went over are novelty, formality, subordinate status, peer evaluation, dissimilarity, conspicuousness, lack of attention, and prior history. Moving on to communication ethics. First, we'll define ethics, which is the discussion, determination, and deliberation processes that attempt to decide what is right or wrong, what others should or should not do, and what is considered appropriate in our individual, communal, and professional lives. So there are some like very obvious unethical communication behaviors that we can think of, right? Like lying, keeping secrets from those close to us, being aggressive in our communication, and like engaging in plagiarism or cheating of some form. But not everything is so black and white. So now we'll move on to the definition of ethical considerations. And this is the variety of factors that are important for us to consider in any scenario in which we're making a decision, conducting an evaluation, or making a selection. And these ethical considerations vary from person to person. As I said, right and wrong is not always as black and white as we would like it to be. And then in that case, sometimes we'll face an ethical dilemma, and that is a situation that does not seem to present clear choices between right and wrong or good and evil. So when we are in these ethical dilemmas, we often lean on both our own values and organizational values to make decisions ethically. And personal values are moral principles or rules that determine ethical behaviors. Organizational values are specific principles or guidelines such as safety, teamwork, integrity, or ownership that are typically outlined in support of any given organizational mission or goal. So that is all for this video. We started off by defining professional communication and excellence. If you'll recall, our definition of professional excellence was being recognized for your skills as a communicator, serving as a role model to those around you, recognizing your strengths and weaknesses, and developing those weaknesses, being audience-centered, understanding the context, and possessing the ability to adapt and continually improve. Human communication, the definition that we are using for the purpose of this course, will be the process of understanding our experiences and the experience of others through the use of verbal and nonverbal messages. We also talked about some relevant communication phenomena in business and professional settings, and those are role taking, previous communication experiences, communication channels, cultural influences, and communication relationships. We also talked about the 4 keys, which are know yourself, evaluate the professional context, your communication interaction, and step back and reflect. And then we went over the interaction model of communication, in which a sender encodes messages with nonverbal cues, and a receiver decodes the messages, allowing for co-creation and meaning. Both messages and feedback are sent through the channel, and the channel is the method by which we send that message. And there's also noise in our environment and internally, and these communication interactions take place in a particular context, which is a location, time, and or occasion in which the interaction occurs. We also talked about communication apprehension. We defined it as an individual's level of fear or anxiety associated with either real or anticipated communication with another person or persons. We went over the few different types of communication apprehension, which were trait communication apprehension, context-based communication apprehension, audience-based communication apprehension, and situational communication apprehension. And we went over some of the potential causes, which are novelty, formality, subordinate status, peer evaluation, dissimilarity, conspicuousness, lack of attention, and prior history. And we wrapped up with communication ethics, which are ethics is the discussion, determination, and deliberation processes that attempt to decide what is right or wrong, what others should not do, and what is considered appropriate in our individual, communal, and professional lives. And when we went over ethical considerations, which is the variety of factors important for us to consider in any scenario in which we're making a decision, conducting an evaluation, or making a selection. And we also went over ethical dilemmas, which are those situations that do not seem to present clear choices between right or wrong, good and evil. And we talked about how our personal values and our organizational values contribute to this decision-making process. So that is all for chapter 1, and I'll see you in the next one.